Hi guys, how are you doing? I'm going to be doing another Q&A video today, and I don't know if you've seen the first one. If you haven't, I will link to it somewhere here on the screen. So I'm going to just try and get through this as quickly as I can. Obviously, I don't want to bore you all to death. So let's see how it goes, shall we? Right. Hi, I was just editing this video and I realised that the microphone looks huge and I look like a tiny little person, but I can assure you I am actually bigger than the microphone in real life. It's just the perspective. So I hope you enjoy the video and the ginormous microphone. What do you do when you get a bad review? So when you publish plenty of books and obviously when you're selling plenty of books, you are going to come across negative reviews, negative feedback, and sometimes it's difficult when they might be things that you actually can't do anything about. So a couple of times I've had issues with printing with Amazon. They haven't printed the cover properly. Also with binding, the pages actually falling out of a book. And Amazon are fine with people leaving negative reviews about binding, printing, whatever. They don't care about that. So
not my fault.
So sometimes it might be that your very first review is a bad one. And I had this once because I'd actually had a spelling mistake on the cover. So what I actually did was I took that book off, and that's probably what I'd recommend, is just unpublishing the book and then doing a similar book, just make some changes to the cover and so on, and then publishing it again. It depends what the complaint is, obviously. If it's just that your book is terrible, then just unpublish it and try and improve it and do something else. But if it's something that you could actually change quite easily and it's your first review, then I would just unpublish it. If, however, you've got quite a bunch of reviews and your book is selling well and you just suddenly get a bad review, well, for most cases, it will get swamped out by all the good reviews. I think the worst point is sometimes if you get sort of some kind of catastrophic review on a book that's really selling very well. I had one not too long ago that was about the printing. Amazon had made some, massive error when printing the cover, and it looked terrible. And I'm sure that did have some impact on book sales, but eventually, once the other good reviews come in, it can balance out, hopefully. Oh, another thing just to mention is one of the negative things I've had before is about fingerprints on the cover. And so I highly recommend, if you ever publish a black book, don't use the matte finish, always use the glossy finish, because you can actually get finger marks on the cover, and people always complain about that. So I learnt my lesson there. I definitely don't do that anymore. So question 2 is, what type of books make you the most money? Obviously I've been asked this many times. I think what people really want to know is, what niche is it that I've been in or other? I mean, I've said lots of times that most of my top 10 books are actually a combination of different journals with prompts, that kind of thing. On the whole, they were quite simple books, and they are in quite competitive areas now. But journals / log books, that kind of area, are the books that I made the most in. I did for a long time publish in one particular niche, and I, to some extent, I suppose, dominated that area. I have tried to publish some books in that area again, but it's just getting harder and harder in order to get those initial sales, because there are so many books now with hundreds of reviews. It does make it a lot harder.
I suppose it is not impossible.
Not impossible, though. You can still do it, and you can still go into competitive areas. You just have to be willing to run ads really at a loss in order to get those initial sales, and it really depends how competitive. So I've gone into certain ones before where it wasn't happening. I wasn't even getting a single sale, and the ads were really expensive. Question 3: if I have several books in a niche, can I still use identical keywords in the back end? So yeah, like 100% you can use identical keywords in the back end. This is in the keyword slots, but personally I wouldn't do that, because you're actually missing an opportunity there to test out other keywords in that particular niche. So maybe in the first book you had some keywords that you didn't use for whatever reason. Maybe you want to mix things up and use some of those keywords now in the other book and see which ones perform better, and then you can always switch things up. So remember, you can always edit your keywords in the back end. It's just that things like your title and subtitle, you cannot change your title and subtitle once they've been published. That's it. But you can go in and you can change your keywords, see which books rank better than others. Then you can always create more books down the line with all those keywords that are working the best for you. So question 4, how many books do I need to make? $200 a month or $500 or $1,000? You know, it's always the same question, but for different amounts, basically, which is a common one that people tend to ask. You could have 100 books published, but only one of them makes $200 a month. In my situation, I have over 500 books, and it's the top 10 that make the vast majority of all the sales that I make. I think one book now in particular has made about a third of all the profit that I've made on KDP. So you know, I definitely had plenty of failures, plenty of books that have never sold. And I also have plenty of books that literally sell 1 or 2 copies a month. I think I have around 100 books that will sell 1 copy or more a month. Yes, you could spend, you know, years on 5 books, but you might not make a penny. It's almost by experimenting in different areas and niches, you stumble across something that works, and then you can kind of delve into that, create more books around that area, which is what I'd suggest. I try and really make each book unique, including the interior, even if that means like some kind of design elements or the font or something that's a little bit different, and not just an identical interior with you know, covers that are a bit different. Then if one of those works, you could try and delve into that niche further, or look at sub niches that are connected to that niche, or, you know, look at the kind of broader area. If you zone out of that niche, what else is there around it that you could look into and maybe expand on that? It does help to understand the market that you're going into and the kind of needs and wants of the people that are in that market. Ultimately, as far as, you know, making a certain amount of money, you know, how long is a piece of string?
I have string. Miles of string.
It really is worth asking someone that you trust whether your books are any good. And you really need to also look at the area you're going into. So if you're going into a highly competitive area, then you need to be looking at those books that do have hundreds of reviews and so on, and thinking, can you really compete with that? And this is the thing, if you want to go into a competitive area now, you really need to advertise and understand that you're going to lose some money. But if you really believe in your book and you can get those initial sales, you can try and get the ball rolling a bit. Hopefully you'll get some reviews, and then that will lead to more sales. I have managed to do this with a couple of books in the last year or so, where I have managed to generate sales eventually in areas where I wasn't sure I was going to be able to. But if you just go into some of these areas that are really quite competitive and don't run ads, and then just put your book up there and just, you know, have your fingers crossed for a sale, it's going to be really hard, because your book is just going to sink like a stone in the algorithm if you don't get sales quite quickly once your book is published. That's why I do personally run ads now to all my new books pretty much. Question 5. So this is going into some questions about ads. Obviously, if you've never done ads and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll leave a link to my playlist that has a couple of videos on ads. I'm definitely not an expert by any means on advertising, by the way. It's coming up to 2 years now, it must be, since I started to learn it. I almost feel like less of an expert now than I did when I started. you never really feel like, oh, you've got, you're on top of this 100%. There's always more to learn, and there's always more that you need to optimize and adapt. So it's not really like that. When it comes to KDP, you've got a very, very small margin there because your profit, per book is going to be small. I tend to have $2 to $3 profit roughly. The problem comes in is when you're spending money on ads and you're actually not making any other money organically, then it's completely pointless. So in my case, sometimes just running an ad will lead to more organic sales, and that's what I want. But when I run ads to new books, I'm not thinking about the ACOS. It's nice if I kind of if it's not too unprofitable, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, right now, I think I have one running at like 150% or something, because it's a brand new book with no reviews in a competitive area. So I know that most people are not going to choose my book. If they click it, they're not going to choose it because there are lots of other options that they have, which have 5-star reviews. Now, if I was running a new book in an area that was really not competitive at all, and I wasn't making any sales, then I'd have to rethink that and think, okay, well, what's wrong with this book? Because this isn't a competitive area and no one's buying it. Then I'd have to rethink it. But in this case, I know that I have to spend more than I'm making to get this book seen and to get it ranked on Amazon. And then once it's ranked on Amazon, hopefully it gets more visibility and more sales and reviews. And, hopefully the ball will get rolling, and that I won't have to be in that position where I'm spending more than I'm making with the book. Obviously, long term, I don't want that to be the case. With established books that already have reviews and sales, I do try and have at least a break-even ACOS. So that means, I'm not making or losing money with it. If it's a bit unprofitable, I'm not bothered either, because these books are all making really good sales organically, as well as, with the ads on top. So ultimately, I'm making a profit irrelevant to whatever the ACOS is, if you see what I mean. So just to clarify, I'll aim for break-even ACOS with my standard ads most of the time. When I'm ranking a book now, I don't even think about the ACOS. If you don't want to spend any money, then I would try and look into as lower competition niches as you can and try and create the best books possible so that you can get some organic sales, and that at least gives you some sort of proof that your books are good enough to sell. You just have to try things and experiment. That's the best way you're going to learn. Ultimately, you're never going to know 100% if something's going to work for you or not. Okay, we're getting there now. So question 6, do you prefer auto or manual ads? So I don't prefer either of them. It really comes down to the book or the niche. So some niches will work really well with an auto ad, and some niches won't at all because they just throw up so many random generic terms. You have to keep putting lots of negative keywords in the list when you're optimizing it, and it can just get too difficult to optimize because there are just too many keywords that are just not performing and and that can happen a lot. For the most part, I do try and do an auto ad at first because I want to get as much data as I can from that ad. And so if I can get some profitable keywords out of the auto campaign, then I can use those in a manual one afterwards. And I tend to use exact match ads now. I've played around with phrase and broad, but it's not really worked for me. So basically I tend to do auto first, see what happens, and then use some of that data that I gain from the automatic ad and using that in the manual ad. And even then, sometimes that doesn't work either, because sometimes the profitable keyword from the auto campaign actually doesn't work then as an exact match in the manual campaign.
Interesting.
So to answer that question, I really don't prefer one or the other particularly. I like the ease of the auto campaign because you really just switch it on and see what happens. Obviously, with exact match, you have to be mindful of what keywords that you're putting in. But I do like running an auto campaign at first with all my books for my new books, just to see what happens and see if any unusual keywords start making sales, for example, that I didn't think of, and things like that. It can be a way of just gathering a certain amount of data for your book, which I like. So we're on the last question of the day, which is question 7. Is it still worth starting KDP? So I've been asked this probably, well, since I started back in 2019. People were asking it then, they were asking it before I started, and they're obviously still asking it now. I think, it depends on various factors, whether you have any experience in design, or if you are quite, good at design, that's going to be easier for you, or if you're knowledgeable about Amazon ads, for example, or if you have some background in keyword research and niche research, then it's obviously going to be a lot easier, I think, for you to get started than someone who absolutely has no experience whatsoever. Now, I know people that have started in the last year and do have a full-time income now, but it definitely is probably less likely than it used to be a couple of years ago. That's completely just my assumption. I don't have any proof, but that's what I would imagine. However, if you're looking to make a part-time income anyway, on the side of something you already have, and you have a job, I think making a part-time income is completely and utterly possible with KDP, 100%. But also, I don't recommend relying on an online marketplace for 100% of your income, whether that's Etsy, YouTube, Amazon, eBay, whatever it is. I would always recommend trying to have some other income coming in. Now, I can talk about this, but basically a lot of my income comes from Amazon. I do have little bits and bobs, and the problem for me is that I'm really bad at multitasking. So doing several things at once, I really struggle with. So that's something that I'm trying to get to grips with in order to have different income streams. Now, I do have some, but not in comparison to what Amazon brings in. So really, I'd like to have more of a balance with several different projects that I'm doing that would bring in money, so that if one just disappears, then that's not going to be a problem. But anyway, I think it's best to not just put all your eggs in one basket. So it's just worth thinking about that before you go it all in on just Amazon and kind of, quit your job or whatever it is that you are planning to do. I think it is still worth it. Be prepared that it's going to take a lot of work, and not listen to, some people who might say, oh, it's amazing, so easy, just upload 200 notebooks and you're going to be making, $500 a month, whatever it is. That's just not the case for the majority of people that ever go onto KDP. And it's definitely harder to make your mark. When I started, I didn't run ads at all. So I used to not run any ads at all, and I got all my initial sales organically and everything like that. And now I do run ads for every new book. So that was 7 questions in total. I hope this video wasn't too long by the time I've edited out all my ums and ahs and whatnot. Please do feel free to leave comments and questions, because that's how I can help you and create videos that are actually useful. I will speak to you again very soon.